So I'm Barbara Schnur, and this is Cy Schnur, and we have been cohorts for almost 65 years. At any rate, during the Vietnam War, our son was looking for conscientious objector status, and that was before the Supreme Court decided that you did not have to belong to a recognized pacifist group in order to automatically get status. But he had read a book which he shared with me about the Jewish rationale of conscientious objection. Excuse me. And and I read it, and up until then, in my not too extensive reading, I didn't find myself as a Jew. I just wasn't included in people's writings, and I thought of myself as an ethnic Jew. However, there was an article from the Birmingham Temple describing humanistic Judaism, and immediately I said, "Oh, that's who I am." So I was all content, and I shared this with Seymour, who particularly as an engineer, decided he would think about it for a while. So the society was meeting in Westport, Connecticut, and I decided to go, and I said to Seymour, "I'm going, would you like to go?" And he said yes. And they made an instant convert out of him. And the next year, we both went to Chicago, and it was there that Sherwin Wine asked us to start a congregation in the Boston area. And
well, first he put me on the board of trustees.
Well, I won't dispute the chronology with you at this point, but he said we would get help from Westport and local people, and so we agreed to do that. And Seymour, it's your turn.
So he gave us a list of all subscribers to the publication, and there were a couple in the area, some in Sharon, some in Swampscott, some in Newton. And I rented a room at the Concord Academy here for $25. And I put out the word that we were having a meeting. And a fellow came up from Westport, gave a talk, and he had been previously in Detroit area, but had transferred his job to New York. Anyway, so we had about 30 or 40 people that agreed that they would come. The problem was where to hold it, because the people from Swampscott in that area didn't want to go south, and the people from Sharon didn't want to go north. And eventually we held it in Natick at a Unitarian church. And we decided to have Rosh Hashanah services in Yom Kippur, and I borrowed the liturgy from Westport, and with another couple, and Barbara and I, we cut and pasted and worked the service up and had a good turnout. And then after that, Sherwin came and gave a talk, and it was reported in the papers, and we had a bigger turnout. And we had a session in Brandeis, and many of the students came, and many others. And we had talks on Jewish music and similar topics. And then a couple who had children who were about to be bar mitzvahed started a Sunday school, and that really took off. A lot of people joined for that purpose. And at the very start, I bought a word processor, the precursor of the computer, and I made up a list of all the members, and I took it to a local store and had labels printed out so I could mail out a newsletter. And that went on for quite a while until the Sunday school didn't work very well. We had to move to a bigger place. We found a place in Watertown that was pretty good. And the congregation eventually grew to about 100 members. And Barbara and I, about that time, decided to take a back seat. At that time, I was still working for GE, and I was international sales manager for turbines. And I was traveling all over the world, and they'd call me up one day and say, "How soon can you get to Buenos Aires?" or "How soon can you get to Tokyo?" or whatever. And my life wasn't my own. I just had to go immediately and try to sell machines. And we had about 3 or 4 meetings in Boston area, different places. I remember one was at the Cambridge Hotel, and another one was at the Holiday Inn and so on. And we usually had people from Detroit or Chicago come and talk, and it was quite interesting. And everything went along pretty well until my health deteriorated due to old age, and I broke my hip, and I have to sit in a wheelchair, and I can't hardly come to meetings anymore because we can't put the wheelchair in the car. But Barbara still goes regularly. One other thing we did was to have the breakfast at our house in Lunenburg. We had a beautiful sun deck and the lake, and people brought food, potluck food, and we all had a breakfast on Yom Kippur Day. And that still goes on,
Still
even
goes
though
on.
we don't live in that house anymore. We sold it to our daughter, and she runs it, helps runs it. And because parking is tight, we limited that to members of KB, and not prospective members or people thinking about it. You have to actually be a member, because the parking is terrible. But that's still continuing.
I had a story I wish you would tell if you could, and it's prior to, I think, to founding of KB, I think. It's the one about your concern when your son was enrolled in a Sunday school someplace else.
Oh,
The one about the rabbi.
Our son was a student at Tufts. What did
No,
you
no.
tell that?
yes, when we was living in Lunenburg, we went to the synagogue in Fitchburg, which, as far as I could gather, was conservative Friday night and Orthodox Saturday morning. Which, made no difference to us because we figured that our kids would get their, know about their background. And fortunately, the kids would come home and tell us about their their day at Sunday school, so we could have a discussion about it. And one day our son came home, and he said the rabbi told the story about two boys who were playing baseball, and there was lightning in the sky. And one of the boys said to the other, "Aren't we fortunate that we have hats on so that we can pray?" And my son said, "What is this all about?" It didn't make a lot of sense to him. So we had a chat about that. But the reason that we left that congregation and thought that the rabbi was not an appropriate leader and teacher to our children was because during the civil rights movement, just after the 3 young men were killed in Selma, there was a B'nai B'rith breakfast, and they had an outside speaker. And we went to that, which was open to the whole congregation. And the message from the B'nai B'rith national speaker was that over the years, Jews had been prominent in civil rights issues and with leadership. And for two reasons. One, because people wouldn't, the establishment wouldn't even talk to black people. So there was they had an exercise in futility as far as that was concerned. And so that there had to be a white presence, and Jews were prominent in that. And the message from the B'nai B'rith person was that now that Negroes, called them, have developed their own leadership, they should not have obstacles to leading, and that we should graciously step back and be supportive, but not be in the front lines. And apropos someone else's question, not directed to the rabbi said those men should not have gone down there. Now, one of them was Jewish, acknowledged Jewish. The other, his family was Jewish, but he was a Unitarian, the two white men. And anyway, I'm digressing and I'm losing my thread. Oh yes, the rabbi said that it was wrong of them to go down there and risk their lives because there are only 3 reasons why a Jew should risk their lives. And we got out of there. I was actually, for the first time in my life, physically ill over something that somebody had said. And we debated what to do, and we were relatively ignorant of the protocol. So we wrote a letter to the president of the congregation saying why we were leaving. And the rabbi called us up and said, "Oh, you should have contacted me." So after some discussion, we decided that we would invite the rabbi over and talk with him. And estimating the situation, I thought it would probably be better if the 2 men just sat together and chatted, but I was within hearing range of the conversation. And they met for 3 nights, but they were like this. They never got together. And I forget the three reasons, all the three reasons why it was okay. Oh, I remember two of them. Of course, not taking God's name in vain. That was one reason why you should risk your life. Another was someone had a gun to your head and told you to shoot somebody else. Then you shouldn't do it. You should give up your life. And I forget what the third one was. But at any rate, we at that point decided that this was not the appropriate place for our kids. And then we went to the Reformed synagogue.
Just 1 second, I think there's something on your shirt that you might wanna, is that just a?
Oh, yes. Looks like a piece of tissue,
There you
thank you. We went to the Reformed synagogue in Albany. And there's two stories about that, and of course you're editing, so feel free. One, we were sitting there on Friday night service, the whole family, and I was reading the text, and we came to the part where it said, Heavenly Father, I acknowledge my dependence upon you, or thee, whatever the words are. And I thought to myself, you know, I really don't acknowledge any dependence upon the Supreme Being. And why am I saying this? So from then on, I decided I would not say things that I didn't believe. I mean, in theory, I believed in that concept, but I wasn't applying it appropriately, apparently. And the other part of that story is that the rabbi would have children's services from time to time, and at least our youngest, Carol, was young enough to go to those. And he would tell stories and parables, but he would never mention God. And here I was in this throes of whatever I was in the throes of, finding out what my religion was saying that I really didn't believe. But I never thought to go to him and talk with him about it. Well, lo and behold, one time the SHJ annual meeting was in New York. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We walk into the auditorium the first night, and who's there but our former rabbi from Albany. And turned out that he tried to take his congregation along the path that Sherwin was successful in, but his Albany congregation rejected him. By that time, we had moved away from the area. And he really, we learned later, it really had a personal crisis, and left. Fortunately, he was a trained clinical psychologist, and he had another occupation and another way to occupy himself. But I thought to myself, you know, he would have been the go-to fellow at the time when I was undergoing my crisis in religion, if you want to call it that. I actually think of it as a born-again experience. I mean, here I'm sitting, and all of a sudden I say, no, this is not what I'm going to say if I don't believe it. And of course, that's one of the very basics of our thought processes.
Now, I have a story. Of course, my job for GE was selling turbines. And at that time, GE had a subsidiary in Spain. that wanted to build part of the turbines, but they didn't have the right kind of steel. There was no place in Spain that they could get that steel. So I went to Germany, to Düsseldorf, to Deutsche Edelstahlwerke, and I negotiated with them to buy steel and send it to Spain. And I was a soldier in World War II, and I was shot in the left arm. And that night they recommended that I take the pheasant under glass, which had been shot with a shotgun and had little pieces of shrapnel in it. So I had to be careful not to eat the steel. Anyway, I probably had too much to drink during dinner. And after dinner, I talked to the salesmen from Düsseldorf, who were probably born after World War II. And I said that I can't understand why a country like Germany, the home of Goethe and Schiller and Beethoven, did such terrible things in the war. And they, of course, had no answer. And after dinner, we went to a bar and got more people involved in the discussion with no good finale. Now, my grandparents came from Austria. I speak French pretty well, and Spanish and German poorly, but I know enough to talk to them about this sort of thing. And that was a very interesting night for me in Düsseldorf. Try to explain to these Germans why they were so terrible during the war.
But the part that you told me, having to do with the buckshot in the pheasant, was that your host apologized for it, and Seymour said, "Oh, that's all right. I have some German steel in me," as we speak.
Right. A little more can't hurt.
A little more dig to the poor guys who were born after it. Actually, Germany has done a good job in educating their kids as opposed to Japan, who's still in denial of what they did before we got into the war. At one point, we met at the West Newton Unitarian Church, and they had kind of a living room, which had no religious symbols at all.
It was a library.
Library.
Yeah.
And Sherwin came one time, and of course we had put out our limited sources of publicity in those days. But fortunately for us, is how I look at it, there was a ultra-Orthodox group up from New York who decided to boycott us that night because we were meeting in the Unitarian Church. And of course, it was just the publicity that we needed or could use at that time. So that worked out well. But they were. I think the reason I thought of them, they were as vociferous as some of the people at the abortion clinics. You can cut that out because that has nothing to do with anything we don't want to get into.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true. We
There
don't want
was
to get tangled.
There's a risk.
We don't want to go there, yeah.
Seymour, there was one more detail, and excuse me if I'm putting words in your mouth, I don't mean to be, but you told a story once about when you did leave that synagogue, the one before Albany, I think. When you left that one, that you said to the rabbi said, "Do you want your money back?" Remember
Oh,
that
yes.
detail?
I said to the rabbi, what are you telling these stories to the kids for, that they have to wear hats? I said, I'm going to leave your synagogue. And he said, you won't get your money back. And I said, I don't want my money back, I want my children back.
I love that. So what do you've had children and grandchildren. What do you think about the future for young Jewish children or KB or anything about the future you have thoughts about?
Well,
Go on.
interestingly enough, at least it's interesting to us, our son was married to a girl who was brought up Catholic. And when they got married, they were looking for a priest to marry them. And they had a relative who was a priest, and he said, oh, you have to go to your parish priest. Well, by that time, they were living in Chicago, and she didn't have any parish priest. And I said, I know a rabbi who can probably find a priest who will at least marry you in a chapel, if not in a church, and that was Dan Friedman, and who was an early founder. He went to school with Sherwin Seminary. So at any rate, they went to Dan, and they had a chat with him and ended up asking him to marry them. So a generation later, their son, who lives in Texas along with his now wife, decided that they would get married here. And our grandson went on a website and found a rabbi who billed himself as an Irish rabbi. So they had the ceremony there, although neither of them are practicing anything at all. Now, Sam's, the groom's siblings, sister and brother, both observe Passover, and they use our Haggadah. So there are threads through the generation, but I don't think any of them have reached the stage where they feel a need for a community of, I guess we use the word religious, don't we? I struggle with that word. However, our older daughter adopted two girls from Haiti, and they were 1.5 and 2.5 when they came. And the younger girl, they're 27 and 28 now, the younger girl has found a lot of solace in going to church, a black church, and they're interesting in many ways. They're interesting simply because they're our grandchildren. But at any rate, the younger one didn't want to have anything to do with Haiti. Just rejected everything, angry with her birth mother, although I think she's changed since then. Martine, the older girl, is a survivor. I mean, she always was. And she's training to be a nurse, and her end objective is to go back to Haiti and
What do you, I mean, you founded KB, you've set something in motion that will go on forever. I hope.
Yes,
I hope. So you have any thoughts about the future generations, or?
well, we started it, but at least I am too old to take a very active part. And so I need people under 80 who can take care of details. But I have a story. I was doing quite a lot of business in Norway. Norway is a big shipbuilding, was a big shipbuilding country. And we made turbine generators to make electric power on ships. And I was there one day, and the Norwegian government opened up a resistance museum. That was very interesting, and I went to it. And when I came back, I went and had dinner with a Norwegian couple. I mentioned I had been there, and I mentioned to the fellow that I was Jewish. I'd been going there quite a while, and he was sort of amazed. He didn't know that I was Jewish. Norway has no prejudice against Jews or anything. And he told me some stories during the resistance that he was a kid on a bicycle and used to carry information to the partisans in the mountains from Oslo and not get caught. And we became very friendly with him. But that was probably one of the few Jews that he had ever met in his life.
To answer your, answer your question more fully. Beyond my own family and their Jewish history or lack of, I feel, and this is not original with me, that it's important to have congregations around the country at least, so that the next generations, wherever they go, can find themselves a happy home and a compatible congregation, if that's what they want.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's important for both of you to know how many, it's just never ending, the stream of families that keep coming and coming and coming. So many people that you don't even meet, but they're coming and coming with children, and finding a happy home.
And it goes on. And every once in a while, when I come into a meeting on a Sunday, and I look around, and I'm kind of astonished that's where we started.
Exactly.
So, and it really is very gratifying. Yeah. It truly is.